Okay, welcome to lesson number 7 of our series of 10 on abstract landscapes, or landscapes and abstraction. And we've been looking at the artist Ben Nicholson recently, and we're going to continue with that. So I talked about breaking down the shapes, making them much more simple within a landscape in order to get us to a little bit closer to this idea of abstraction, and to take out some of the details and start to minimize things, which is what we've been focusing on for most of the classes. And then we put in some other little ideas as well, such as painting onto a board and using different materials such as wax crayons to sand back the design as well, to get some texture into the work as well. So I'm planning for the last 3 lessons to do something a little bit more painterly, but so this lesson will be the last one on the abstraction. But what I'm planning to do is take that a little bit further, because we've got they're still quite pictorial, which is absolutely brilliant. But can we take it just a step further and start to break down those shapes and simplify them even more to resemble some of Ben Nicholson's more abstract pieces that I've also shown. Okay, so we'll have a look quick on the wall. So this is what I showed you last week. So I'd done this drawing just here from the photograph in the middle. And as you can see, it's quite different to the real thing. I've made the house towards the back, or the barn, or whatever it is, towards the back there, a little bit smaller, to give it even more of a sense of space. The boat looks like it's looking slightly from above as well, and then I've added a little bit more of a wall and some texture and some scribbles for foliage at the side. So I've inserted some of my own ideas into this piece. Over here is where I've got to with our painting. This was it before when I started the lesson last week, and since then I've been working into it a little bit. I managed to do a little bit at the end of the lesson after we did the clifftop scene. So what I thought I'd do is talk a bit about thumbnails and planning and drawing out ideas in order to sort of arrive at something that would be aesthetically more interesting, you know, with the shapes and things, to go into a more of an abstract style. So you remember me looking at and showing you this piece. So I think this one is a little bit more of a still life, because on the right hand side you can see there's a shape that looks like a cup, and then there's these curvy shapes and other sort of beaker like shapes on here as well, all of which are overlapping and interlocking with each other. So my intention is to have a go at creating a composition. It might end up just being a drawing this evening, because I'm going to get on with the painting that we've got over there as well tonight. So we'll go over to my lovely little desk. So on here we've got the original drawing that I worked on, and we've got this hardboard. So you'll remember that when I painted the surface of some areas, while the paint was wet, I scratched into the surface. On other areas, I'll just make the cliffy one a bit smaller for a minute and get in a bit closer. Yeah, there we go. So, and on some areas I've sanded back, but if you remember, I started off by painting it white, sort of quite loosely and lightly to start that process of creating texture, and then I started to build in some more sort of clean, accurate, if you like, shapes on there, sanded back through them. Here, you can't see very well on the screen, I did candle wax. I did it over here as well, candle wax, and then painting over the top of it to reveal something of what's underneath. So I've got this little scratchy device here, so you can scratch out some of these and then repaint them and things like that. So these are all the techniques that I'm using here. I'm gonna use a brush to do some outlining and all sorts of things tonight as well. So one of the things that I spent quite a bit of time on last week was drawing this piece just here. So it was based on, I haven't got the photo with me actually, but it was based on obviously this cottage that's sitting on the edge of a cliff somewhere. I didn't really think it was Cornwall, it could be anywhere. But I used this as that picture to then, because the edge of these cliffs were all sort of jagged and things, weren't they? And there was lots more detail. So I've almost turned it into geometric forms in this case. Okay, so now I've started to think about what I would like to do with this picture. So if I can just find it, I can there it is. Right, there it is. Right, so here's my picture here. So if you want to sort of take things a bit further, it's often a good idea to have a little bit of a play around and see what comes out of simply doing some small sketches. So you may have heard of thumbnail sketches. They're just small, very quick drawings to sort of get your ideas and stuff going. So over here, I've started to say take those the flat sides of the cliffs and literally turn them into more kind of rectangular shapes, and then I've been using these diagonal lines to join those up, so they almost start to become three-dimensional planes. So this is just one idea of a million ideas that you could come up with, and here, look, I've just done literally the outline of the house. So I'm really tempted to put the roof in, because as soon as I do that, it becomes a bit more recognizable as a house. So I'm just gonna do it like this for now. So the idea of doing things a little bit differently perhaps is that you suggest things. So if we think about the Ben Nicholson picture, so if I bring that up again, have to bring it forward there. So if we look at that, obviously there's lots of very simple shapes here, but there are suggestions of what this thing actually could be, and as I mentioned, perhaps a still life picture. So that's kind of what I'm doing here, is I'm trying to simplify things down into planes, which are going to interlock a little bit more. So this is just the first version of that. And I might want to do something really radically different. So if I start again, so we've got the process starting from our drawing and going on to the next piece. So let's see what I can do here. So another rectangle. So I'm going to try something else in a second, I think. See what happens. And it may not work, but that's the idea of doing thumbnails, is just to try out something different. So I've got all these overlapping shapes. Now that horizon that we've got there, I think I might extend that through there. And this cliff, I think I'm gonna make it into more of a curved shape here. And here, like that, and the house now becomes just a rectangle to differentiate it from the rest. Now I also had this curvy shape here going around the base of the cliff, so I'm going to make that line get a little bit wider just there. And I'm going to put the lines in for the sea and another line there. Then we'll shade those areas in. and I might decide, don't like this one, I'll try another idea. So when you look at this, you might think, well, what is that? But then there might be a suggestion of something that you can read in the picture, and it might also be through the colours or the textures that have been used as well. So on the drawing I had angled lines coming across like this. Oh, sorry, it's a bit off screen. Maybe I can curve it over there as well. And in the foreground there was actually a hill in the foreground just there too. Now then I can vary the thickness of my lines to show where the edges of things are a little bit more. And just here there was a little circle going around the house, so I'll include that, and then I'll do more dashes. And then in the sky, so I've boiled this image down to these simple shapes, and that's just one or two ways that you can approach simplifying a drawing like the one we've already been simplifying. So we've taken it from a photo to something like this, and then of course you can carry on and try another version. So I won't spend too much longer on this now, so that you can get on. So it might be that I do something like this. And we end up with something that's bizarrely different. In our composition. So again, I've simplified it down. So once you've drawn out these shapes, you know, it's worth spending just a few minutes thinking about what you can do with these shapes to take the whole thing, neaten it up and make it resemble something that could work for a piece. Okay, so quite a lot to think about there, and some nice ideas for turning things into slightly more abstract ways of approaching it. And then of course you could take one of these designs, draw it up a bit bigger and much more neatly, and then start working into it as well. So that's what I thought you could try tonight. I'll draw one of these up a little bit bigger, and then I'm going to continue painting this lovely thing just here. Okay, so I'll just bring that picture back on. So try it out, see how you get on. You may need to do several different thumbnails before you see something that could work for your particular piece or for your particular landscape that you've chosen. Okay, so I thought that would be fun tonight. So during the rest of the evening, I spend most of the time working on this painting. So I've used, just as a reminder, I've used candle wax to get some textured areas. I've used sandpaper on this MDF board, and I started off with kind of a white wash. So this picture here was one that I drew during that week as well, outside of the class. And I was just talking here about how you can change some of the scenery, some of the foliage, for example, into simple shapes as well. Start breaking down those shapes to simplify the image and create kind of a design, I guess, as well. So before I go on to working on that picture, I do a little bit more drawing, looking at creating further abstraction of the design, but I go a little bit further by adding some tone and shadow into a larger one, which you'll see me do in just a second. So based on this drawing, which I did from the photograph that I had last week, we'll see how I turn this into an even more abstract design. So you can see here I'm starting off with very simplistic horizontals and verticals and some diagonals, and then I start to add circles. So those semicircles represent some of the steeper parts of the cliff. I changed it to semicircles because basically I just wanted to experiment and see what would happen with that. And circles are quite nice because they create this lovely sense of movement around the composition that we're creating here as well. So I'm using a ruler now because I'm drawing up a design as opposed to just sketching one out. So I'm keeping it quite geometric, if you like, and sharp with the shapes and the lines. One thing I also like to do is thicken some of the lines up to give you a sense of being able to peer around and past things as well. So for instance, the edge of the house there, I might do that a little bit thicker so that it feels like it's in front of something, if you like. So I'm doing what I've done on the drawing pretty much, is adding some lines in, and then as I did in the pencil drawing, I added some tone and shadow. The pencil drawing previously, adding the tone and shadow helps to decide where the forms and the shapes are going to appear within the picture. So and you can see how adding that little bit of tone I've just added in there has lifted the cliff top or the cliff edges forward out the background, and those horizontal lines perhaps suggest the sky as well. So I'm using another technique here, just using a rubber to add some white lines onto the foreground, and then some further tone and shadow. So I don't quite finish this off this evening because I wanted to get onto the painting of the other image and try and get as much of that done as possible. I don't really finish that either, but it's still really good to see how those sanding back techniques can work. So here, look, you've got the middle section is just left white, the foreground is dark, and the area around the house is dark too, and then some of the cliffs are also dark. So we've got a sense of dimension and form within that image. So we're back over to the painting now. So I'm gradually just going to build up all of these areas. And as I always say, acrylic is great for this because you can put a layer of colour down, build it back up again, take it back. You can do a lot with it because it dries nice and quickly as well. So I'm quite keen at the moment on these nice graphic-y outlines within my image. So I'm using an acrylic and a very small round brush just to go around the edges of things here, and it brings a little bit more of a crisp feel to the picture as well. Fair enough, it's not as abstract as perhaps the design I was just looking at a few minutes ago, but it's working. It's working, and it's interesting to see what these textures and so forth, how they work with the nice sharp edges as well. You'll see in the sea in the foreground, just up above the boat, sorry, in the middle ground, you can see how I've sanded back the board right back to the board itself. So MDF is quite nice to work on. It's a nice smooth surface, but something like a thin ply, a bit of plywood is lovely too, because you get the grain of the wood coming through the image and it adds a really lovely quality. I haven't got that on here, but it's still quite nice to work on because it's smooth. So just here I've applied the paint. Obviously you can see for the sort of doing a mock brickwork effect, and then I've scratched back into it with one of my scoring tools, and then worked around it with a bit of grey as well. So that's brought that area forward, added a little bit more texture, so we can feel like we're coming down kind of a slope towards this area where the boats are and so forth. We're going to go around that brick wall, sea defence if you like. So here I'm refining and adding some more shadows into the boat to get that sense of light in there. Highlighting the mast, whatever it is. So once I got going with this, I found it more enjoyable. The early part of making a picture is always the bit where you're impatient to see how the image comes, and then gradually it starts to appear. So I changed the waves from my original design. I had these big sweeping lines before, so here I've just simplified it down with some small lines or a line of white and then painted between it. So we've got these more gentle lines coming through, and then a new layer of paint, but I've sent that layer of paint back a little bit. I've got this bluey green coming as you come towards the seashore, and then we're back to the other blue before that. And here I've actually just used a pencil. So Ben Nicholson often used a pencil to do a lot of his outlines in his images. So I've done pretty much the same sort of thing there. It's quite a nice soft sort of grey graphite sort of pencil, so you can add the lines in and they come out without being too harsh against the rest of the image, and therefore the boats can still have their place. And I quite enjoyed doing the lobster pots in the foreground, because we could play around with those boxy sorts of shapes and have a bit of fun with the colour there. So in other words, creating something of interest in the foreground area. So the green there I just scratched back with the scoring tool, and then just to give it a bit more weight in the sky, to push our eye back down to the horizon, a sweep of slightly darker greyish blue, and then here we go at the end, just sanding everything away. So I hope you've enjoyed tonight, and you'll be able to hear me scratching away in just a second, but I hope you've enjoyed this evening, and we'll be back very soon to do some more painterly stuff in the next few weeks. So have a good few weeks, and I'll see you very soon.